Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Merrimack School District Budget Committee to order. I would ask that you please all rise, and I would also ask that our new superintendent, Dr. Mark McLaughlin, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance of our country. Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all and good evening. My name is Stanley Heinrich. I am the chair of the School Budget Committee. Before we go anywhere else, I'm going to start over here with this big wide guy and have everybody introduce themselves, because we got some new faces on both sides. Andy?
Thank you, Stan. I'm Andy Schneider. I'm the school board liaison to the budget committee.
Lee French.
Andy Connor.
Gillian Savage.
I'm already been introduced.
Chuck Mower.
Brian Stisser.
David Ilg.
Jordan Gualyumi.
Amanda Heidberger.
And the lovely lady in purple over there might look familiar. She's Pat's daughter and my daughter. That's Jennifer. She'll be taking the minutes tonight because Pat's teaching a crochet class at the high school. And at this point in time, we're going to start out with the budget reviews, and we're going to have the elementary schools first. But what I do have to do is get a hold of one of our members on the phone line here so that they can participate also. So maybe the elementary folks might want to step up to the table there while I get this call, hopefully successful call.
Julie, sit right here. You sit here.
Well, I thought she was answering the phone. 321-777.
Hello, you've reached 777-3831. Please leave a message.
Well, she didn't answer the call. Please excuse me for a moment. Carol, you didn't answer the phone you gave me. Okay, I'll call you right back. Bye. Okay, one more time.
Hello?
Hi, Carol. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Now we're all set.
Okay. We got to go through the legal stuff first.
Yep.
Carol, where are you right now?
Satellite Beach, Florida.
And is there anybody with you?
Just Ginger.
And Ginger is the Budget Committee's cat.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to be reviewing elementary, then upper, middle, and high school. And then when we get to do the minutes, we'll cut you off.
Okay.
All righty? If you need to say something, just mention my name and I'll put you on.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to start off this evening with a review of the elementary schools. And we have 3 elementary schools in town, Thornton's, Mastrocola, and Reed's. The liaisons for the Budget Committee are David Ilg was the team leader, Gillian Savage, Lee French, and our newest member, who just got appointed a week and a half ago, Andy Hunter. And who's in charge this year? Would you introduce your lovely group of ladies?
I
And
absolutely
then the
will.
other question I have for you is, do you want to go first, or do you want your liaison to go first?
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm Kimberly Yarlott, principal of Reed's Ferry School. And here tonight, we have the 3 principals and 3 assistant principals. To my left is Julie DeLuca, the principal of Thornton's Ferry School. And to her side is Michaela Champlin. She's the assistant principal of Thornton's Ferry School. And to my right is Michelle Romaine. She's the principal of Mastrocola Elementary School, followed by Bonnie Painchode, assistant principal at Reed's Ferry School, and followed by Alicia Hanson-Prue, who's the assistant principal at Mastrocola Elementary School. So thank you for having us tonight. Thank you for all the work that you do as the Budget Committee. And in particular, thank you to the team that we met with today. We had a lovely conversation and a tour of the school. And Mr. Ilg, as the liaison, is going to start for us.
Go ahead, David.
All right. Yeah, thank you for having us today. It was myself, Andy, and Gillian. We met today after school. We had an excellent conversation. Oh, no, I'm sorry. And Lee, too. My apologies. So we went over the budget. The elementary school year after year is very in line with where it has been in previous years. There was a couple increases. One of the big ones is enrollment's projecting to be up next year, so all those materials, supplies, texts kind of increase with the students. The Mastrocola is looking to get some new chimes. That was a small item on the budget. Reed's Ferry, speakers, furnitures in all the classrooms. Not in all the classrooms, but furniture across the board, just replacement of old furniture. Some new stools to help with kids who kind of benefit from a little bit of movement in the classroom. What are those called, the flexible stools? Flexible seating, part of the universal design for classrooms to help kids kind of access the material, especially the kids that require that movement piece. That was pretty much all we discussed. The elementary school budget's very similar year after year. So, did I miss anything? Any big ones?
Gillian, do you have anything you want to add as a member of the liaison committee? Lee?
We did discuss the projector and audiovisual needs that each of the schools seem to have at approximately, was it $40,000 each?
Yeah, so I think that was something you guys were looking into some options for going forward, but not in this budget, right?
And Andy, do you have anything to add to it?
Nothing to add to the questions. I would just say I do appreciate the tour of the school. For someone being new on the committee, it was very helpful to go and see the requirements firsthand, the furniture requirements and the things you're asking for. You know, seeing it, like they say, the picture's worth 1,000 words. Actually seeing it firsthand was very helpful. So thank you very much.
Okay, it's all yours now.
Well, we went over the budget as we had with the school board. We went over the line items. There was really nothing that stood out. We pointed out that our budgets are lower than they were in the past, despite having increased enrollment. And that's partly due to a pause in curricular materials for purchases of things like the math program Envisions. There's a pause in that purchase. And there was a little bit of a bump last year for social emotional learning curriculum. So due to the lack of those curriculum materials, we're actually all presenting lower. The impacts to the operating budget would be the additional staff members. So that's not presented in our budgets, our individual school budgets. Common to all of them, again, is some minimal furniture replacement, which we've been doing consistently over the last 12 years, doing bit by bit. And we're looking at some flexible seating options and some more desks and chairs, basically. And other than that, I would open it up to the Budget Committee for any questions that you have after you have taken a look at the budget to see if there's anything that stands out or that you would like some clarification on.
Okay, does anybody have questions for the elementary schools? Carol, I'm going to start with you first just because you're sitting there in Florida.
No, I have nothing.
Okay, thank you. Going around here, Amanda? No? Jordan? Dave, you right? Ryan?
In terms of the pause on curriculum purchase, is that because the needs have been met, or was there some other cause behind that?
So I'll let the Assistant Superintendent, John Fabrizio, speak if he chooses, but I can answer the fact that when we purchased the Envisions math program, the license was good for 6 years. So we do have a pause and an ongoing purchase with that. There are still math supplies that need to be purchased, but it's not the huge, large curriculum. And as curriculum revisions occur, there are often financial or fiscal impacts. And for the social emotional learning, that was a one-time purchase that doesn't have a repeated cost unless we change the curriculum. So it's particular to any kind of curriculum development that's going on at the district level as to whether or not there's going to be any kind of a large chunk of money that is designated.
Okay, and the audiovisual equipment that is being sought, is that being hoped for next year, or for the 2021-22 budget?
So that was an instance of, we were passing through the gym and we have this large cloth hanging down on the wall of the gym, which is a makeshift screen. And we'd mentioned that at all 3 lower elementary schools, we seek to have a projection system with a retractable screen. But that's not something that we've put forward to a budget discussion at any level with the school board, or we have spoken to our administrators about it. And looking through at a grant for a possibility. So no, it's not projected to be in the budget at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chuck?
Good evening. Could you inform us how many new students are anticipated and what you are doing in terms of accommodating and preparing for that dramatic shift?
So once again, I may seek support from our superintendent or assistant superintendents, but I can say to you that it's kind of a moving target, because when we do the projected enrollments in October, come January, they often or this year in particular, they don't reflect the actual numbers. So we have actual numbers and projected numbers. And based on what's been occurring this year, we've noticed an increased enrollment. So I'm just going to check with Mark McLaughlin to see if he'd like to speak. Oh, you're there. I am. Shadow. Thank you.
So thank you. What I would tell you is that we have, for years, we have worked with an organization that has NESDEC, who has provided us with their demographic information. This is something that Mrs. Chaffrey used this is a resource Mrs. Chaffrey used for years, and we've continued to use it. And they've been very, very accurate, we've found, in the, give or take, but generally speaking, over the last number of years, they've been quite helpful in our projections. In their latest report to us, which we get annually, that supports the development of our budget, they report for the Merrimack School District to expect between 50 and 60 students across the grade levels every year for the next 5 years. They don't project past that. I think the science doesn't allow them to feel confident projecting past 5 years. But the NESDEC has projected between 50 and 60 students over the next 5 years. What we shared with the board recently was that when we put our projections together, we do it using the metrics that we've used for a long time. And that's based on, again, projections. We've recently shared with the board actual numbers. So the numbers that we get are based on October 1st enrollments. And we also know that after October 1st, things change. Either population decreases or increases. And we have about 109 students that have entered the district across the grades since October 1st. So we shared, sort of a sense of updated numbers. I don't anticipate that kind of sharp increase is going to continue, but it's proof that the issue of population is quite dynamic in Merrimack right now, and it reflects a lot of the things that we've, seen in terms of, development and so on. But anyway, so does that answer your question about the population enrollment?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Is that Chuck? Killian?
I don't have a specific question. First, I'd just like to say thank you so much for hosting us today. It's always a pleasure to come and tour the school and walk around and play with the toys. As a parent and as someone who sits on this committee, I feel very privileged that I get to see sort of both sides of the coin in a way that I can look beyond the numbers but also beyond what I see at the school and get a full picture. And it always amazes me how much you guys do with what you have to spend and how well you make do and how well you provide just such a wonderful experience as well as education for the kids that you have. So I just want to say that.
What's that, Killian? Andy?
I have nothing further to add to my previous comments. Thank you.
Okay. Lee?
To second what Jillian said, thank you for all the work that you do, keeping things together with somewhat limited resources that you guys have. It's amazing to see in person rather than just to hear about it. And I was educated today about the programs, especially at Reed's, for some of the special needs children and how much work the paras do, especially with the autism children. So I don't think the public is truly aware of how much goes into those kinds of programs and what an excellent program we have here in town. So thank you.
Andy Snyder, you have anything to add from the school board's perspective?
No, just to sort of add to what the superintendent stated, this spreadsheet, which everybody can read it from here, right? It has the detailed information. And if you look at the actuals for this year, the modified actuals, and the estimated for next year across the elementaries K through 4, there's approximately what did I say here, 50 student increase just in the elementary school levels next year. So that 50 to 60, based on this, there's a lot of focus on the elementary schools. So the added staff that went across the first grade and kindergarten is matching the need that we're seeing for population. So I just want people to understand that the reason that the additional staffing was brought at the elementary level was to meet where that focus has been over from especially this year and then to the following year. So just wanted that clarification.
My question has to do with furniture. How much furniture do you have that is unusable? It's sitting in a pile somewhere because it's too dangerous to use?
Well, if it's too dangerous to use, we get rid of it. So I would say that, we use every piece of furniture to its fullest lifespan. And Thornton's Ferry and Reed's Ferry had their 50th anniversary last year, and we're cycling through original furniture. So when you buy really good stuff, it lasts a long time. How much do we have that we hope to replace. Going forward, I would say we're almost complete with our desks and chairs, which we really put a priority to. And the other things such as bookshelves and coat closets and et cetera, those tend to be kind of pushed down the road a little bit because they really don't impact day-to-day student performance and there's things that are still usable. So I would.
No, but multiple weld marks on a desk can get to be pretty old.
Yes, exactly. Yep, so we
dangerous.
take good care of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments for the elementary school? Thank you, ladies. We'll see you at the public hearing. Next up is the the Mastrocola Upper Elementary School. The liaisons for that were Chuck Moe was the lead, Shelley Jacoby, and Amanda Hyde-Berger. And how would you like to introduce yourself and your lovely assistants?
Thank you for having us this evening. I'm Marcia McGill, the principal of the Upper Elementary, and this is William Morris, our assistant principal.
Would you like the liaisons to go first, or do you want to go first?
Mr. Moe may start. Yes,
Chuck?
we'd like him to.
You have the lead. Go
Thank you
ahead.
very much. Amanda was unfortunately not able to meet the time schedule that we were working very tightly on. But Shelley and I both met with Marcia, and we found some illumination about the furniture. And I'm very happy to see that the school board agreed to put furniture replacement back in the budget. It's a modest replacement plan to begin with and not a complete replacement plan. We had the opportunity to see firsthand how old some of the equipment was and its condition. Clearly, the upper elementary school is not afraid to use something to death. But beyond that, we found that their budget was about $9,000 less than the previous year for various reasons of one-time expenditures and so forth. The maintenance of the facility, although not under the direct responsibility of the principalship, is nevertheless exceptional. And it adds to the overall quality of what takes place at the upper elementary school. And we have made progress in updating furniture and facilities and curriculum and so forth. And most of us know that all of those advances are somewhat fragile. They can be reversed very easily. So we're very grateful that we have an exceptionally well-run upper elementary school with an exceptional team. It's bright, it's positive, it's really quite a facility.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda, would you like to add anything? Okay. And Shelley is excused, Jen, along with Mackenzie Murphy. Now it's your turn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mower, for sharing your discussion and the tour of our building last Friday. As I'm sure all of you have seen in our budget, we are down. Our largest expenditures would be our continuous effort on our literacy program, which would include reading materials, writing materials, and then the other expenditures on here that are of significance would be our furniture replacement. We're continuing to replace cafeteria tables 2 at a time, and we're looking towards replacing chairs, and we're just about done with that. And then we're looking to start to replace our computer tables in our 2 computer labs. We have tables that have quite a bit of a swag in them. So we'd like to start systematically replacing them, over a 3-year period of time. So that's pretty much the significance of our budget. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them for you.
Chuck, go right ahead.
One of the things I would like to point out in the furniture replacement is how very careful and thoughtful the administration is about the application of furniture to learning. It's not just the utility of the furniture. And you'll pardon me, I'm a chair maker. That's my trade.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that chairs particularly have to have, first and foremost, utility, but they also have to have appeal. They have to satisfy the pretension of the person that sits in them. And it's equally true of the furniture that is being utilized thoughtfully by the administration, in that it encourages the shape of the tables they're selecting, encourages social interaction amongst the students, and invites them to participate and collaborate. Most people wouldn't think furniture could do that, but we obviously have people that are so attuned to what works best in childhood education that we see this actually being applied in a very efficient and useful way. And I'm very impressed with the deep thought that you put into how all of the facilities react to the best interests of the students.
Thank you.
Now it's time for questions. Carol, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it would be the principal or whether this would go more to the superintendent. But I'm looking at the enrollment projections, and I'm interested to see the increase in enrollment at elementary, but at upper elementary it looks like it's actually going down. And I wonder if somebody could enlighten me what the trend is and why.
Mark, would you like me to answer that? I'm happy to. I know that again, I'll go back to the report that Board Member Schneider was sharing, that in October we were projected, or we had 571 students. By January we had 584. We built our budget with projections of 557, but what is actually been revised for projection next year is 570. So it would be up a little bit, about 13 students.
Okay,
Okay.
Carol?
Yeah, I'm all set.
All righty. I started that way over here. Lee?
Hello, I was noticing in your social science field trips, a considerable reduction, almost half of what you had last year. And I was curious why that was.
We did that 2 years ago. Our sixth graders, as a part of the economics, component of our social studies curriculum, we used to go to Enterprise City over in Portsmouth, and Enterprise City closed. So what we started last year in place of that experience was a career day. So we bring in about 25, 30 community members from Merrimack and the surrounding towns to come in to teach our sixth graders about careers and possible careers, and what it's like if you're going to be an aerospace engineer, or maybe some kind of a technician. We have a variety of people. And when we stopped that cost, there was a cost in there that helped to offset the Enterprise City, and because we no longer go, we didn't need that cost in there, so we reduced that.
Thank you.
Andy?
Good evening.
Good evening.
You'll have to forgive me, this may be somewhat of a newbie question, but as someone new to the board, I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyways. I see a line in here, world language. When I think of world language, that's something that I would think of would be at the high school level. And to see that at the upper elementary level, it piques my curiosity. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and tell me about the world language program in your school?
I'd be happy to. We know that offering a language to students, the younger you start with the language, the more proficient they become, through the years. So our world language program in Merrimack starts at the upper elementary level. It's a basic program. It teaches a lot of basic vocabulary and general greetings and a lot about the culture of the countries. We teach Spanish and French, and our students do half a year of French and half a year of Spanish, both in 5th grade and again in 6th grade.
Thank you.
Gillian?
I don't have any questions.
Chuck? I'm good. Brian?
Because you mentioned that the largest item is for literacy enhancement programs, some members of the community have expressed concern about the standardized test scores for Merrimack. So I was wondering if you could very briefly speak to how Merrimack at the upper elementary level compares with state averages or comparable towns.
You mean the state assessments?
Yes.
We pretty much, with state level wise, if you look at our state assessments, the New Hampshire, state assessment system, the New Hampshire SAS, we pretty much compete with the state level. We're at that level. I haven't compared it to exact other towns. I'd have to look at that and get back to you with more
approximately
information.
tracking the mean? Approximately tracking the average?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Jordan?
I noticed here in part of the overview, there's a number of items that are listed as furniture replacement. And on each of them, it says this is the 5th phase or the 4th phase or the 1st phase of this replacement. Does that mean that a particular amount was decided upon and it's allocated so much per year? Does it mean that, how is that figured? I mean,
Well, when we look at the cafeteria tables, we look at what we have, we look at what is failing for us, what we have on hand, and then we estimate what would it take for us to replace that. And if we bought 2 tables a year, how many years would that take for us to be able to replace the old tables? And again, Mr. Mower had mentioned we're going from very long tables where kids are trying to yell down to a rounded table that then is conducive to, social interaction, and then usually we find better behavior. So whenever we're looking at that, we're looking at what do we have. And when I look at replacing the science room stools, I look at how many science rooms I have, where I've replaced those already and what I have left. Same with the computer tables. I have 2 labs. I know how many tables I have in there, and as I replace them, how long would it take me to replace that at the same rate?
Set, Jordan? Amanda?
I'm all set, thank you.
Anybody else? I would like to thank you for the job the 2 of you do at the upper elementary school.
Thank you.
And all your dedication over the decades.
Well, you know how dear that building is to my heart. 34 years I've spent in that building.
In a variety of positions.
You're right.
We thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Stan,
Yes, Carol?
is there any possibility of relocating that microphone a little closer to the head table? I can hear the committee fine, but I'm struggling to hear whoever's sitting at the head table.
There is no other way.
Okay. I'll just make do then. I just didn't know if it could be repositioned.
No.
Okay.
All righty. Feedback. Up next is the Mastrocola Middle School. Yeah, not the Mastrocola. Sorry. It's just the Merrimack Middle School. I apologize. Liaisons are Gillian Savage, who is the team leader, Jordan, and Shelley Jacoby. And I would like you to introduce you and your lovely assistant, please.
Very good. My name is Adam Carragher. I am the principal of Merrimack Middle School. And this is Shauna Demore, the assistant principal of the middle school. Thank
And
you.
would you like to go first, or do you want your liaisons to go first?
I would, of course, bow the honor, so to speak, over to Gillian for
Gillian,
going
it's all
first.
yours.
All right, thank you so much. Shelley and I went to the middle school yesterday. Jordan was not able to make it. We still love him. It was my first time at the middle school, so I had to Google how to get there. It was a treat. It really was. Thank you so much for hosting us. The cookies were delicious. Shelley didn't go on the tour because she's been to the middle school multiple times over the years, but as it was my first time, Mr. Kerrigan was very nice and gave me a very nice tour of the facilities, and they're truly impressive. It's a 15-year-old building. The theater is beautiful. It's clearly well-maintained and well-cared for. So that being said, looking at the budget, it's very straightforward. It's right on par with the numbers from last year. The few notable changes, there was a 3.5% increase in transportation cost over last year, which from my understanding is cost of transportation went up. We're looking at, and this seems to be across the board for all the schools actually, it's a 10% increase in office supplies, so, paper. And I think the biggest increase is the implementation of replacing 2 cafeteria tables at a cost of about $5,000 for both. I think this is a great implementation, doing 2 tables per year as opposed to waiting for all the tables to be falling apart and then suddenly trying to ask for $50,000 or something like that to do all of the tables. Being proactive and replacing them as need be. I got to see the tables, and even though they're rated for 15 years, you could clearly see that the wear and tear of hundreds of students using them daily takes effect, and there's weld marks, and some of them are broken, so they need to be replaced. So that's all I got.
Okay. Jordan, you want to add anything? And Shelley is not here this evening. So now it's your turn.
All right. So the only thing I would potentially correct is the increase in office supplies. I believe to be 3.5% as well, if I'm not mistaken, although I could be mistaken in that. Is it 10? Okay, very good. It's 10. I beg your pardon. 3.5 for the transportation. My apologies. So really, yeah, there's not a lot of frills or anything really in our budget. We're really just trying to maintain a lot of the programming that we have and stay true to what we're trying to be at Merrimack Middle School and providing a good experience for our kids. So I would love to entertain any questions that the committee might have for us in relation to it.
How's the new roof working out?
The new roof is wonderful. Wonderful. So,
Carol, you have any questions?
No, I'm all set.
Okay. Go back around this way. Amanda?
I think I'm all set, thank you.
Jordan? Brian?
I'd just like to ask the same question I asked of the upper elementary school in terms of how Merrimack compares on standardized test scores with the state average.
yeah. So we are, the last that I saw, we are around average. I wouldn't say at average, maybe slightly below average. It's something we're definitely cognizant of, and we're trying to address those different, issues and help build the skills that the students are lagging behind on, which is one of the reasons why we have some of the programs that we have, such as Star 360, to be able to help identify where deficits are for students and help us be able to support students, as well as really find out where their strengths are as well, so we can continue to grow those, because it's not just about students who are struggling, but how do we continue to help students grow even beyond, right? So.
Okay. And you said slightly below. Is that a significant difference or a minor like statistically how
The-
significant?
Yep, sure.
I appreciate the question. So, so all schools are assessed on English language arts and math, and then at some grades, science. So what we've shared with the board, for a number of years are, those assessment results. And in the last 10 years, it's true for Merrimack and true for every other district in the state, there have been 4 state assessments in that 10-year time. The reason that matters is because when you try to talk about trends in the performance of students in those content areas, it's really helpful to have 3 years of the same assessment so that you can kind of, compare apples and apples. And just the way that things have been dynamic in the state, there have been, multiple assessments. So each time there's some similarities in the testing, and then there are some differences. Each of those times, both the teachers and the students need to get readjusted to the nature of the assessment. So, so it's hard to talk about trending. What I would tell you is right now in the New Hampshire state assessment that we have currently, New Hampshire SAS, at the middle school, there's a state average, and then Merrimack is probably just below the state average on both ELA and math. That hasn't been the case in previous years when there have been different assessments. In language arts, a couple of years ago, we were ahead of the state average. So, but remember, it's also a different cohort of students. So I really appreciate the question. It's hard to answer a question in a way that's satisfying because we don't really have multiple years of same test data to be able to say we are consistently overperforming or underperforming in a given thing. What I would tell you is that, and this team, as well as your other colleagues we've had and the ones that you'll see, we really try to be innovative, try to really, look at the data, whether it's a brand new assessment or one we've had a year or two, really try to dig deep. We also have local assessments. We have, as Adam mentioned, we have STAR 360 and a lot of other local assessments that we also use to kind of triangulate. So to see, like, is this just an outlier, or are 3 different assessments all telling the same story about the student? And we have teams that, evaluate that. And so we're never resting, and we're never saying, well, we hit the state average, good for us. I mean, we're really always trying to push, and we have, lots of teams of teachers behind the leaders, who do that. So it's probably not the full answer that you were hoping for. It's just a little bit of the context of the state of the state right now. We're hoping to keep New Hampshire SAS for a while so our teachers and our students can get familiar. I also would point out, and this is true for Merrimack and every other district, that we've moved now, this is more of an online platform than it was before. So some of our younger learners, haven't got a lot of experience. I mean, they're always, on the computer, but not necessarily in the context of taking an assessment. So there's that startup too of getting familiar and so on and so forth. So all that's to say it's dynamic.
Okay. Is there any type of estimate at the state level of how much statistical variation, how much error has been introduced by changing the assessments to get an idea of whether differences are significant or not? Or
So
is that
I
not
wish
something that's been looked at?
I am not aware that the state's done that. It would be great work if that could happen. It would be very helpful to districts. I'm not, if it hasn't been published broadly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Andy, you wanted to add something?
So there's another part of this, taking away what the assessment and how it's changed and all that. Mark talked a little bit about the action the district's taking to, with certain assessments and other remediations and stuff. It's also important to remember that we as a district have invested over the last 2 years heavily in a complete new math program that spans all the different grades. You hear us talk about Envision math program. It started at the elementary school and is now growing through the upper ones. And it's a consistent program that actually spans all the different schools, which never really existed. It was sort of piecemeal a bit. And we're starting to see, and as we've seen at the board reviews around progress made by using those programs, especially elementary, we're seeing improvement in the ability of the students to learn, which will build towards improvement in testing and things like that. So none of us on the board like, the test results, and one of the reasons we've invested in the district's invested in the curriculum advancement is to help improve, not only test scores. I mean, test scores are just a measure, but actually the way that the students internalize and be able to look at and be able to learn and sort of all the different aspects of their learning, that's part of it. The other thing is, if you watch the school board meeting from 2 nights ago, you'll see that the English language arts team presented their updated curriculum and strategy, and there's a whole lot of good work going on there across all the different schools across the entire district that is, again, going to help improve the ability of the students to learn and be able to pick up, which should over time also show the advancement in that. So he talked a little bit about the tests. I want to talk about what we as a board are supporting to improve the knowledge that our students pick up and their ability to learn. So,
Thank you, Randy. Chuck?
Adam, I wondered if you could speak to an issue that has enjoyed some attention at the school board budget committee hearings. Your field use is limited because of a drainage problem. And I wondered if you could speak to how that affects your delivery of services to children.
Definitely would point to the fact that it is challenging for our physical education classes, particularly in the spring. It also impacts some of the athletic programs as well. So limited field use is really what it comes down to due to the saturation. So we're looking to potential.
Could you perhaps give a percentage of?
I think Matt wants to comment.
I realize Matt would like to answer that question, but I'm very interested in hearing the principal's response to some attempt to percent the lack of use of that field by the middle school.
Yeah, a lot of it is weather dependent, is what it really comes down to. So it's very hard. I would definitely suggest that over the past few years, it's taking us longer and longer to get out onto the field. So it's hard to quantify with a percentage, but I would simply say, it's oftentimes mid-May prior to our ability to be able to go out onto that field.
I'm sorry, what was that last statement, please?
Probably mid-May has been around when we're able to actually get out to the field at best.
So is it just simply an inconvenience, or
no,
does this actually affect, in some quantifiable way, your delivery of services?
Well, it makes it so our physical education classes are not able to go up onto the field and use those fields. So it does impact the ability for them to carry out the curriculum the way that they have it planned.
And Chuck, as I remember, the care of the fields is handled by maintenance, and I believe there was something I read somewhere that they were looking into some options for that to make that field more usable.
Well, yes, I would love to hear from Matt Chevenel now as well. I simply wanted to get the principal's perspective on how it interrupted the delivery of services that he's responsible for.
Greetings. See how quickly I obeyed that command and went about face and sat down back at the audience? Well, we have in the maintenance budget.
Let me apologize, Matt.
No, that's fine.
I certainly did not intend in any way, shape, or form to appear to be directing you to sit down.
Well, that's fine, but you can do as you please, Mr. Mower. Anyway, to continue on, in the maintenance budget, we have approximately, which we're not doing tonight, we're doing, next time we get together, it's approximately $75,000. Because the field we're talking about is really the upper field that's utilized for soccer and whatever other sports that are used up there. And there's a big cut in the hill, and from that hill that was cut down, there becomes the field, and a lot of that material was dug up and replaced with good material that will drain. But however, underneath that material, it's all clay, so it just kind of holds the water there. Years ago, we put in a nice swale at the bottom of the hill, so when water leaches out from the hill and goes on the field due to rain and springtime and snow, that the swale would take it away and put it down the hill into the drainage system. Now that swale has gotten clogged up, the riprap has slid, so what we want to do is get in there after we had a consultation with Steve Keach to put in a perforated pipe and put in some underground drainage in that area. So when it hits that point, before it gets to the field, it's going to go in the pipe. It's going to be wrapped with a semi-pervious kind of paper and then roll down the hill. It'll just take it and wick it away. So that's basically our step one to get the field back in operational shape. Because I know this year, I don't think it was usable at all because of the spring that we had. And that gave us significant issues with the utilization for both the middle school and the high school, too, and MYA, and everybody else who's just dying to use the fields. So that's my little answer.
Well, it sounds like a very responsible plan.
Thank you.
All set, Chuck?
Yes, thank you.
Over here.
I don't have any
You don't
questions.
have anything else? You have anything else?
So I'm going to save my questions about the field drainage for the maintenance
Okay,
when we
fine.
review the maintenance. But I do have some questions. On page 14, there's a couple accounts, and forgive me, they're kind of abbreviated, so I'm not sure what the full name of them is. Family and something, I'm assuming then that means science.
Family and consumer science.
And then tech ed. Both of those accounts last year were about $19,000, and then this year they're zeroed out. I'm just wondering if you can explain the reduction in that budget and why you are no longer requesting funds in those accounts.
Absolutely. So last year, we moved from a specific curriculum that was no longer being supported in both of those programs. And so really that money was in order to make it so that we could continue delivering those particular subjects. So it was really mostly a shift, if you would think of like a curriculum type of shift. So more of a one-time type payout in order to make it so that they can accomplish what they're out there to accomplish. So.
Okay, so you have everything you need in those accounts. They're not zeroed out.
They're not zeroed out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a need there that we were
Yep.
not addressing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wait. Andy, you want to add anything else?
No, just to support the question that Andy had. So the replacements that were done last year were for equipment that had become either obsolete or not usable from the original stocking, if you will, or furnishing of the middle school when it was first constructed. So it was a one-time deal to just upgrade those things. That's why it looks away, because it's 0, 0, 0, then 1 year it's poof, and then it's gone. So it was just that one time redone. So that's the reason it's that way.
Anything else you'd like to add? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Next on our list is the high school. And Amanda Heidberger was the team leader, and she had Mackenzie Murphy and David Ilg. David Ilg had to leave on a personal thing, and as I said, Mackenzie Murphy is excused this evening. So Amanda, You'll be the only one talking of all the liaisons. Would you like to introduce your lovely staff, please?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sharon Putney, the principal of the high school, and we have two assistant principals, Peter Bergeron to my left and Richard Zampieri to my right. And in keeping with the tradition this evening of the schools to have the liaisons go first, I would defer to Amanda Heidberger.
Okay, Amanda.
Thank you. So me and David met with the high school staff on Tuesday. Mackenzie was unable to join us, but we had a great conversation about the budget. For the most part, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're pretty on par with what they've been doing traditionally. They have some furniture needs, but not a lot, so they're, like all the other schools, staggering their furniture replacement. They are starting to work on a futures lab that will work with students that have extra needs or special needs or challenging needs, so they're looking at some furniture for that just to start off with. They've had a couple increases because of transportation, as well as new line item for training the, forgive me, I can't remember, the athletic.
Oh, the coaches training.
The coaches, I'm sorry. But overall, their budget is good and solid. They're working, they're stretching their money in a very nice way. I don't feel like they're being frivolous at all. And I would just like to point out from an educator's perspective that it seems like every year your budget either stays the same or gets cut just a little bit, and costs go up every year. So I think you guys are doing a great job with what you have.
Thank you.
Now it's your turn.
All right, thank you. So just to highlight a few things about the high school budget for this year, for 2021, there are several line items that have been either reduced or level funded in your books. Some of these are one-time purchases. In the previous budget, or increased purchasing through some online vendors, and we have continued our efforts to reduce paper consumption through online access to information. There are some proposed increases that reflect replacement of worn materials and increased costs for supplies and materials. There are also some increases in the area of athletics, as well as transportation, and some replacement and additional texts in the budget. Some additional costs provide increased services to students and materials to support increased project-based learning in the classroom and differentiated instruction so that the needs of all our learners can be met. In athletics, we've requested additional funds to cover projected increases in officials' fees and assigner fees. Some of this Amanda talked about too, the additional funds to cover the cost of coaches' education and training, transportation costs to reflect those increases for away contests and playoff games, the purchase of Family ID software, which provides a web-based platform for athletic registrations, online paperwork information and tracking and communication improvements. Some additional items that have been requested in the budget are the Physical Education and Health Department is requesting ACFAST medical anti-choking trainers, as well as the replacement of some of their CPR dummies and the AED training devices. And the Math Department has requested calculators so that they can continue to support the implementation of the new math curriculum. So it's just a few highlights that are in the budget, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Carol, you have any questions?
One thing, it's just a technicality in the things that they're requesting under the athletics thing on their kind of cover page. And it refers to officials' fees and assigner fees. What is an assigner?
So for every sport, well, just about every sport that's offered at high school, for example, we're playing ice hockey right now and basketball, there's one person who assigns all the officials throughout the state. And in previous years, we didn't put that fee in, and our athletic director, Michael Susi, did this year. But be it fall, winter, or spring, there's a person who takes care of those assigner fees. And then the NHIAA is always good letting schools know in advance when the officials' fees, which they are having difficulty in some of the sports to get officials, but for those fees to, they're going to give us like a year or 2 years out. But the assigner fees are important, that we take care of those.
Okay, Carol?
Yep.
Anything else?
No, I'm all set.
Okay. We're going to start over here. Lee?
Good evening. I was looking at the 504 coordinator budget and see that on average it had been about $25,000 in past budgets and increased to $40,000. And I see down below there's an increase due to the elimination of partial grant funding. I was wondering, are there any other grants or any other means that we could supplement that and try to reduce that from a fairly significant increase in that particular item?
So originally, this was part of the 2A grant for the district, and I think probably the superintendent's office might be able to answer more specifics about the reasons for it, but it sounds like what you're asking, are there other resources that we could use? I don't know of any. I do know that the guidelines for that 2A grant did change. The focus changed of that grant, and that's why we needed to pick up the remainder of those monies. And I'll defer to Dr. McLaughlin.
Mrs. Putney doesn't need any help. I just would, if the larger question has to do with are there other grants, what we're finding right now is that there are grant availability, at least at the state and federal level, is less easy to come by than it used to be. And those that are available are having increasing constraints put on them. And so what we find ourselves is in the position of needing to really determine, okay, what are the areas that we really need that grant funding for, and then direct those funds to that. And what, will have to either be done away with or lessened or taken up in the district budget. And the 504 coordinator is an example of a decision made for that, because it really is pretty important. And the funding that we used to rely on for that is just not, it doesn't, that number has decreased, and the requirements make it no longer possible to use it for that purpose. So that's just in addition to everything that Mrs. Putney said. So I would say that there are fewer and fewer grants to rely on.
Chuck, you had something to follow up on?
Yes, please. Could you explain for the public what a 504 is?
So if a student has a 504, I consider it like putting on a pair of glasses. It's an accommodation that levels the kind of the playing field for that student. Some students might have a temporary 504 if they, say, broke their leg, and they might just need to have kind of a temporary accommodation to get from one class to another or something like that. And there are some students that have some medical issues that require some special accommodations that might have it more permanently, but there's some that come in flux and come and go. Depending on an accommodation. Is there anything you want to add to that? Is that okay? Okay.
I assume that compliance with the 504 accommodation is mandated at federal or state level, or both?
Yes, it is.
Sit on that, Chuck? Okay. Yes, I'm good. I didn't mean to cut you off if you had something else. Okay. Andy?
No, it looked like Jordan had a question, but we can go around the room. Yeah.
And if it's 504 related?
No.
Oh, okay. So my question is, on page 7, there's a transportation budget in there. Suggested budget was $174,000, some odd dollars. the school board has made a recommendation to trim that budget by $25,000. So my rough calculation brings it down about $159,000 and some change, which seems to me like it's still about $8,000 above the last actuals that were reported. So my question is how do you think that affects you if that cut is held?
We believe that we will still be able to meet the needs of the students that are applying for the VOC program. Those numbers are difficult to project out because the schools, the receiving schools, determine how many Merrimack students go to each school, Nashua North, South, and Alvern. So it's an estimate based on the trends that we've seen over the last few years. We believe and hope that we'll still be able to meet all the needs of those students applying for those programs, and we hope that our students are still able to get into all those programs and will be able to fulfill their transportation to those various programs.
So with the fact that previous, and we don't have this year's actuals on there, but we do have 2018, 2019, the fact that you've never, 141,000 is about the previous actuals that were supported. Is it fair to say that the school board has just made the proposed budget more accurate, closer to your actuals, and this should not affect your ability to operate this particular line in the budget? Would that be fair to say?
I would speak for the board.
I guess what I'm trying to get after is the school board, by reducing this budget, are they any way, eliminating your ability to be able to perform this?
I don't believe so.
No, part of vocational transportation is the regular transportation contract we have. We use those same buses for voc ed. So as Rich said, it all depends how many buses are going to Nashua North, Nashua South, Alvern, because we're not a vocational educational center. They're all regional in this state. And you have to provide per the state standards of vocational educational opportunity for kids. So we think that, well, obviously, I know what the board's rationale was, and Andy can correct me, looking to get back in line to what we were spending in the past. And if you look back probably 4 or 5 years or 10 years, you could see it's probably around that amount, but with incrementally increasing and sometimes decreasing depending upon the circumstance. This was just adjusted in the past year to include a 3.5% increase in the transportation contract, but it's that plus the utilization. And we think that the board was just trying to get closer to what the actuals have been over time, thus the $25,000 cut.
Okay.
And the high school's comfortable with it.
Okay. Go ahead, Andy, before I
So,
continue.
so I'm the guilty party. I was the one that sort of worked this with administration and the school.
In other words, my short answer is, Andy did it.
Yeah, right. Thanks. And the reason, we look back, and one of the first questions we ask is, where are you at this year in terms of your spending? Because you're right, you only have one view, but you could go back in previous year's budgets and see the trend was always sort of at that lower amount. We didn't want to go all the way down because we knew there's an increase in cost of transportation. So what we felt is we would get closer this time and then look to see what it is. And if they overshot it, then the next year we would adjust it a little bit. But we thought we'd get more accurate in terms of the budgeting for this cycle through.
And then my next question, and this is probably more towards Matt now that he went back and sat down. On page 27, there's some accounts that, and one of the account at the top of the page is a great example. Last year had a budgeted line of $2,000, and this year has a budgeted line of $0. And there's multiple accounts like that throughout the budget where, at least what I can see historically, they've been at $0, except for last year. There was a one-time expense is what it looked like to me, and then this year it's back to $0. My question is how does that play into the default budget? Is that somehow calculated into the default budget as a one-time cost, so it's removed? Or, this is kind of an educational question for me, if you could indulge me and educate me on the default budget a little bit.
Well, sure. When you look at the bigger picture, if you bought math books for $30,000 in the approved budget, and then next year you don't appropriate math books, should you then take $30,000 out of your default budget? The answer to that is no, because you've still bought books. So this goes into the larger area of equipment. And when I bring all the equipment lines together in all the schools, there's a significant appropriation that adds up to it. So the purpose is there. If we bought no equipment, then I would take all equipment out of the default budget.
Okay.
But for these onesies, twosies, they carry over.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Matt, hang on, because I have a question. Well, you know, I mean,
Go ahead, Jordan.
Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
this is a different topic, but I'm pleased to see using technology to make us more efficient. So I'm happy to see here that one of the things that's budgeted is software to make it easier for sports registrations and online paperwork and all that. I guess my question, and kind of in the spirit of efficiency and savings, is that something that can be used beyond the high school? Can that be used for the other schools, for permission slips for field trips in the middle school? Can it be used for other kinds of things? Because I think that you know, we all talk about, you know, doing things the old-fashioned way. I guess I just wonder, is that the tip of the iceberg, or is that really just specific to the high school athletics?
Can I answer?
Please do.
You look like you wanted to do something?
No,
But,
I was going to agree with you.
okay. But I kind of have, I haven't fully vetted it with the high school, but we do, but maybe they know, maybe they don't know. The good thing about this product, Family ID, is it integrates with My School Bucks, which is the lunch program that we use. And we just recently, working with Nancy Rose, lit up the Family ID program to work with the high school as part of a try it and see. We wanted to see how the income from Family ID can be differentiated when it hits the bank statement, because it's all electronically. So we wanted to visually see that. And someone here may know what I'm talking about. But the plan is, if it works well at the high school, to deploy it district-wide as a plug-in to Power School, where you could pay for all field trips, everything you could imagine you could set a price tag for, and people could go in, use their credit cards or their debit cards or whatever they choose to, or PayPal even, I believe, and use this Family ID program to pay for it. The benefit is there's a good audit trail to it, which we're always looking. There's not a lot of checks involved anymore. I forgot how to write a check. My wife never gave me the checkbook anyway, so it doesn't matter. But the thing is, it's much more easier for the end user, and it provides a tighter audit trail for us in order to keep track of checks and cash that comes into the schools for field trips, for whatever it'll be, book sales, something like that.
Now, can I ask you a question to put you on the spot?
Sure.
In cases like that, are we passing along a fee to the parents to use that, or do we absolve that as part of using a tool like this to make us more efficient?
I'm not sure about the fee structure of Family ID. I do know on my school bucks, there is a transaction fee of $1 or something like that when you go in and utilize it. Probably some of you who have would know better off the top of your head than I do. But there is something that is passed on. It's kind of like if you ever gone to Ticketmaster and bought a ticket, there's probably an $8, convenience fee, they call it, to get your tickets online and have them on your phone. So when you go through the gate, you can just, show your phone and there's your ticket. So it probably, if there is a fee, it would be passed on, but it's a minor fee.
I just want to make sure that fee doesn't prohibit people from adopting a better and smarter way to utilize paying for things.
If we found out that there was if the fees were too high, that parents were rejecting it because of the fees,
We do something about
we
it.
would probably do something about it. But when you hear about the lunch program and how much of our revenue from parents is collected from the lunch program, it is the vast majority of parents who are using it right now. So that's saying our fee structure is probably reasonable. Yes, thank you. I'm gonna go back now.
Did you have anything? I did. Okay. Gillian?
I don't want to cough in the Excuse me. First, just to sort of echo Jordan, if that is something that could be used district-wide to make it easier and more efficient to not have to send permission slips home and pay and write checks, I think that's a brilliant idea. And by the way, the My School Bucks is $2.49 for a transaction fee. So it's not prohibitive. My question is, I was looking over, and on page 11, for the transportation for the co-curricular activities, for the clubs, it notes, proposed presents administration's goal to defray the cost to the students. So clearly students contribute to their participation in clubs. My question was, given the increase in costs for athletics, is there a student athletic fee for students to either participate as per student, per sport, and if not, is there thoughts to implement one?
We don't employ what some people on the budget committee might know of, or some people in the public, a user fee. There are some schools, for example, that have, I don't want to give anybody any ideas here, but they have, their hockey program, because ice rental is expensive, they may charge those student athletes a fee to play ice hockey, and that would be very unfair because, that's their playing field. They can't step right outside like we would at the high school to use, Student Memorial Field. But we don't have a user fee. We have many active booster clubs that pick up the extras. We provide all the very basics. In co-curricular, we do our very best to help out, all the students who are involved. We have approximately 42 clubs right now. 10 are competing clubs. We have Science Olympiad, US First. Theater you would consider, because they have their one-act plays coming up soon, and then they pick one play and they go to the New Hampshire Educational Theater Guild. So did that help answer your question?
Well, my question actually didn't have anything, it wasn't about the clubs, because those are extracurricular activities. Yeah. My question really did have to do with specifically student athletes. I know some schools, some districts, when I was growing up, my school, if you wanted to play sports, there was a flat fee, and it helped contribute to transportation, uniforms, what have you. So I was wondering, do our students have that now? And if not, is there thoughts to implement one?
We don't, and you're right, our neighbors to the south in Massachusetts, a lot of their school systems, they have a user fee. There are some school systems presently in the state of New Hampshire that charge a fee for insurance, and it's a minimal fee. I hope we never do that in Merrimack. I don't think, personally, that'd be the right thing to do. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Gillian. Anybody else? Chuck?
I just have some modest curiosity about the tech ed program at the high school, and I was wondering if it includes any CNC capabilities for carving or other computer-controlled equipment for woodworking.
We do have some, the wood shop teacher, Mr. Carl, and some of the advanced woodworking classes has some students that have that capability. And we also have another teacher who also employs some of that with some of our students.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Last round.
If I could follow up a little bit on Gillian's question about the use fees for athletics, you said that you hope that we don't ever go to that. Could you elaborate on why that is a little bit?
Well, I guess I grew up in a time where, where when you went to high school, you were able to just participate in that particular sport or co-curricular activity. I'm sure if we decided to, have a user fee, in I think it might be difficult for some families, to take care of those fees.
What would you see being the impact on students if that were to happen?
I would tell you that, and I said earlier that some of the school systems in New Hampshire have a minimal fee, and, if that was the case, I think once again, I go back to the hockey piece, some districts do that where they charge a fee, and I think that's, unfair that they would, do that.
I'd like to jump in. I live in a town where my children have to pay to play, and I'm well aware of, though my children were all able to participate, not all of their friends chose to participate, and it's difficult to turn a student away based on that. They may not ever share with an adult why they're not choosing to go out for a sport, but I can assure you that they won't if it's a burden on their families. So I appreciate what Merrimack does for all their student athletes.
And so in that situation, how does that, say, impact their competitiveness for college admissions?
It's difficult to project. If a student doesn't play and that was a sport they wanted to perhaps be accepted into a school, they may not be able to get into a school. That's a possibility. It's difficult to put a specific quantity to answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Amanda.
I just have a follow-up comment. I think the whole point of public education is to have equal opportunity to all the students, and if you put a fee on this, as people are implying, not a lot, but like some students wouldn't be able to participate, and you're giving them an unfair advantage because of their financial status, which I believe isn't fair.
Well said. Andy Schneider.
So I just want to pick up on something that, that they talked about, and that's the booster clubs. One of the traditions in Merrimack is the booster clubs for sports tend to try to assist in areas where extra funding is needed, whether it's in equipment or particular transportation or something. We try to budget as well as we can for that without charging formal fees for students. But the booster clubs for the sports are where that sort of the voluntary support comes in terms of being able to make up that gap. So I think Merrimack has a long tradition of booster clubs for various sports that recognize that we don't have pay to play, but want to make sure that the burden's not all on the taxpayer. So I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that aspect of the whole sports picture.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you to the three of you.
Thank you very much.
Have a safe night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This concludes our, yes, Carol, I'm sorry.
Can I ask it's kind of across all the schools question. I don't know if Matt or Dr. McLaughlin would be the right person to answer it, but I'm wondering if they could give me a guess across the board throughout the district, what percentage of our texts and other learning materials are we now utilizing online as opposed to hardcover text? Because I've long felt like the more we can go online, we avoid, wear and tear on textbooks, and the material can constantly be updated, and I'm wondering how much progress we're making in that direction.
John Fabrizio is going to come to the mic to answer your question, Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Hi.
I know that you mentioned both Dr. McLaughlin and Matt, but I figured I was the one that wasn't mentioned, so I'd come up to the table and do it. So thank you, and I hope you're doing well in Florida. So I think the answer to that is it's a dual system, Carol, that really when we come to our curriculum and what we're purchasing. So for example, we talked about Envision Math earlier, and that's our most recent large purchase in the district. And on that, we just finished training actually this week for our educators. We had over 45 educators take part in 4 small sessions over the past 2 weeks to look at not only what we have for the book piece, the teacher edition, the materials the kids have in their hand, but now the online component. We spent the first year really implementing more of a traditional curriculum, but now we're moving towards an entire online platform that students can access with interventions in there, with extensions in there. And really the technology part of it is to enhance learning, and that's the purpose of technology. You know, we can learn with books and paper, but the nice thing about technology allows us to take it to either a more remedial place or a further place. So with math, for one, we're there. We talked to the board a couple nights ago about our need to revise our English language arts curriculum from K to 12. We're going to work on that same thing with the same vision in mind to have dual platforms. One, the traditional paper pencil, because you need that as a tool also, but also the part of having an online component to our curriculums. We have that in our science, in our math currently, and like I said, we're moving towards ELA. Social studies has an online version of the text too in certain places. So I think we're having, as I said, the dual versus one versus the other right now.
Okay, well, it sounds like we're headed in the direction that I'd like to see us go. I don't know that we're, in my lifetime, going to see the elimination of textbooks, but the more we can do online, I think the more efficient we get.
Yes, that is correct. I think that what the problem with completely one way or the other, I think, again, we talked about access, and we want to make sure we're offering equal access to. And where it's more online is a lot of things that would be reinforcements, like I said, or extensions or interventions. We're using a lot of the online materials to get us there.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
This concludes our budget reviews for this evening of the schools. Next Tuesday night, January 28th, we will be reviewing the district-wide budget, the food service budget, library and technical services, maintenance, and student services. Our meeting will be over at the Merrimack High School cafeteria, and we start at 7 o'clock. And Carol, at this time, I'm going to disconnect you.
Okay, sounds
Have a good night.
Good night.
And now it comes time for public participation. Is there anybody that would like to come and speak to the Budget Committee about what we've reviewed this evening?
Good evening. Tracy Bull 5, Independence Drive. Forgive me, I hadn't planned on speaking, so I'm going off the top of my head here, but Committee Member Savage brought up the question of what amounts to pay to play, and it's been a good long time, but back around 2006, 2007, the question was raised by a school board member as part of a campaign commitment she had made to a bunch of constituents, and it was one of the times where you actually saw people come out in droves to speak against it. Not just booster committees, but sports parents all around, and there was a lot of discussion surrounding the fiscal commitment parents make to have their kids participate in sports. And the net on the whole thing was people were resoundingly against it, and the cost savings to the taxpayer would be almost negligible. And at that time, Matt, bear with me, school district budget would have been in the $65 million range. The fees would be even less impactful now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the Budget Committee? Seeing none, I will close public participation. At this time, we have some minutes to approve. We have 2 sets of minutes. The first set of minutes is from December 10th, 2019, And would somebody be so kind as to move the minutes as they're printed or whatever, and then we'll take up any corrections, additions, and deletions.
I move to approve the minutes.
Can I have a second? Seconded by Jordan. Any corrections, additions, or deletions? Seeing none. All those in favor of the minutes of December 10th, 2019, please raise your hand. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Passes with 2 abstentions. The next set of minutes is January 7th, 2020. That was our meeting where we came and interviewed and then appointed somebody to take an empty spot on the Budget Committee. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I move to approve.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Jordan. Any corrections, additions, or deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor of those minutes, please raise your hand. You can approve the minutes because you were a member at the end of the night. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Passes with 1 abstention. 2 abstentions, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, as I said, next meeting is next Tuesday night, the 28th, 7 o'clock at the high school CAF. If you can't make it, please make sure to let me know. And if it snows that night and school's closed, we will not have a meeting. If school's closed due to the snow, no meeting. And then we will go to the snow date, which would be Thursday, January 30th. Does anybody have any other things of concern or something they want to find out about that has to do with the Budget Committee?
I have a question. If we're
Yes.
going to be at the high school on the 28th, is it possible that if some members arrived early, we could see the windows that are in question at the high school? I believe, isn't there a warrant article on replacing some windows at the high school? Thank you.
As long as we get less than 7 members taking the tour, we're okay. Because if we get 7 taking the tour to look at the windows, that's a meeting. We could break during the meeting and go look at windows if we wanted. Then everybody could go. Yes, Andy?
Just in case you're so inclined, outside of that meeting, if you go to the high school, staring at the high school, if you go to the far right-hand side around the back, behind the green building and sort of that path that goes to the back of the high school, the left side, yes. I'm pointing. Left side.
The way the school buses go in.
Thank you. In between the green building and then the white maintenance building, if you go back that path towards the back field on the left side of the high school, all the windows that you see stacked in the older section, they're silver in color. Those are the old windows right there on that side. So if you want to see them from the outside, that's where they're at.
You're not trying to get me arrested for poking around back there,
No.
are you?
Just go back, use the track. I mean, it's public stuff.
They'll steam up the windows getting real
Yeah.
close.
Well, yeah, that could do that.
Anybody got anything else? Then I would, first of all, like to thank you all for coming tonight. I would like to thank my daughter Jennifer for taking minutes, and you're probably going to see her again if we have a Thursday meeting. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Jordan. Not debatable. All those in favor? All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Please stay warm and drive safe.